I was originally going to make a more complex video, but economically, creating one like this makes a lot more sense because I'm going to go into depth with these pieces of hardware to an extent in future videos. So, if you're new to Real Home Recording, or maybe you haven't seen these other videos, I love a service called Access Analog. Essentially what it is a plugin that accesses remote analog audio hardware in different areas of the world, which allows you to stream audio from your digital audio workstation software to their server, process your audio with essentially full control over the hardware, and then that audio is streamed back to you so you can hear it in almost real time. Well, over the past year, since the last video I did that was similar to this one, they have put up a lot more hardware. So this video is going to feature some of that hardware, not all of it, and I want to talk to you about specific pieces of the hardware, starting with the Manly Massive Passive. Now this was on a previous server, however it was not available alone, and you had to spend a lot of money in order to rent it. Well, you still have to spend a bit above the average going rate for the Access Analog credits. Now also you can have unlimited Access Analog access, and I think that's like $125 a month. That sounds like a lot until you go and look up how much hardware rentals cost, not including shipping, and you realize that's actually a pretty darn good price per month. In fact, it's almost a steal if you do this professionally. Speaking of which, I honestly believe that having access, to continue the pun, to high-end analog audio hardware will give you an advantage over other sound engineers. I mean, it's just the fact that although plugins are really, really good these days, and you probably don't really need analog hardware, in my opinion, analog hardware adds just a little bit something extra. The sweet spot is wider than plugins, and at the end of the day, if you can get better sounding audio, again, you're going to make yourself happy, you're going to make your customers happy, you're going to make your audio sound the best it possibly can. And if you're able to do that for a little bit of extra money, why not? So, Manly Massive Passive. I could talk about this one myself, but instead I like to read other people's comments from reviews that I gathered around the internet. By the way, I should mention, in addition to each hardware piece, you're also sending your audio through very high-end converters. Names such as Lynx Aurora N, MyTech, Pacific Microsonics, Focusrite RedNet, Prism Sound Lyra 2, Rupert Need Designs, I believe that's the Master Bus Compressor or Master Bus Converter, but I might be wrong about that. Anyway, very high-end audio hardware linked with converters that are also very high-end. You'd be spending a lot of money just to use this stuff, and that doesn't include the electric bill. That doesn't include maintaining the hardware. I definitely love using Access Analog and its brother, well, not really brother, but its competitor, mixanalog.com. Two great services that really have just made my mixes and masters, I don't want to say a lot better, but certainly better. It costs about $6,300 for the non-mastering version, and I believe the only difference is that the controls are stepped. I think the mastering version is like $7,000 or $8,000. The cost of rental is about $22 per hour if you go with the credit system. Sweetens the high end and enhances the low end in a natural way. It's not brittle or hyped, good at cutting mud and boxiness. Neutral but musical, worth every penny. That's easy for you to say. Reviewer. The one piece of gear I couldn't replace. Very flexible, can be subtle or aggressive. Attenuating frequencies on the Massive Passive is counterintuitive at first, because you first have to select the frequency that you wish to cut, engage the cut switch, and then turn the gain. Speaking of which, I'm going to make this full screen so you all can see it. So yeah, there's the switch which you choose between cut, boost, and out. So the bypass button. And then next to that is a switch where you can choose either a shelf or bell filter. Very cool. And then once you choose the cut switch, you turn the gain control clockwise as if you were increasing the gain on another equalizer. However, it quickly becomes second nature once you do a session with the unit. Another reviewer said, "The best sounding equalizer ever. I've used it on kick drums, snare, drum bus, vocals, guitars, and of course mastering. Perfect on everything. Just running an audio signal through the MP makes it sound better." Don't use mixing theory when operating this EQ. Use your ears. If you love your music, don't trust it with anything less than the best. Whatever you boost, it will be awesome. Magic. I have used different equalizer brands over the years, but none of those could do everything the Massive Passive does. This box has soul and precision. Get gorgeous sounds from subpar instruments when recording. Then when mixing, it sits on my mix bus. Try the Massive Passive on difficult vocals, grand piano, and instruments that need more mid-range depth. This particular studio had an amazing rack full of all the high-end pieces you could think of. When I patched in the MP, it blew them all out of the water in regard to dimensionality, openness, and high-end snap. Think of this as a Pultec, but with a lot more control. Oh, this is me talking. I've put a lot of miles on the Acoustica Audio Magenta plugin. This is the real deal. There's a reason why over the years I've continued to recommend the Magenta plugin. So yeah, one day I'm going to do a comparison between this and Magenta. Maybe I'll wait for Magenta 6 to come out, and at that point, we can see whether it's worth it to rent this in the cloud or not. Okay, moving on. So this is the Avalon VT737sp tube channel strip, which if you buy the real one, it'll cost you around $3,900 US. On Sweetwater, it had over 44 user reviews. That's a lot for a high-end piece of gear. It was first released in the late 1990s. Vocals sound warm, full, round, and crisp, leaving very little to do while mixing. If you pair it with a Neumann TLM 103, you'll get jaw-dropping vocals. Works great with vocals and guitar. It can remove low-end muddiness. The compressor can be side-chained to work as a de-esser. The tubes and transformers provide nice warmth. Great for voiceover work. The only thing missing is a limiter. Speaking of which, maybe I'll run my voiceover track through this Avalon channel strip before I release this video. Gives you that big studio sound. A must-have for pop, R&B, and hip-hop producers. One of the reviewers said that they had issues with the tubes blowing out. Obviously, that was a negative review. Somebody also said that the compressor is only okay, but a distressor or even 1176 sound better. EQs are also just okay. The main thing about this channel strip is the preamp, which obviously we can't use it for recording. I wonder if this preamp gain can be used with the line-in mode. Makes bass guitars sound fat like yo mama. Increases the quality of any microphone. This thing is all you need for vocals unless you need extreme levels of distortion/compression. The compressor is not fast. Perfect for vocalists and guitar players. Silky and smooth. Makes vocals sit perfectly in a mix. Album ready. If you need validation, names like Christina Aguilera, Motley Crue, Snoop Dogg, Bob Dylan, The Crystal Method, Michael Jackson, Phil Collins, Puff Daddy, Crazy Town, AC/DC, Disney Productions, whoever they are, Kelly Clarkson, whoever he is, Dr. Dre, whoever she is, and more, have all used this preamp. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. I think that comment says it all. So like I said, when I put this video out, I'm going to run my voiceover through this Avalon channel strip and try to pull out some awesomeness. All right, next up, I'm going to show you guys the Focusrite. I believe it's called the Blue 315 Mark II. And this is on a new server called the Magic Garden from Brian Lucy. So I'm going to hit play and you'll see what's going on here. So first of all, yeah, that's pretty cool. The MyTech, which apparently is just, it's not 100% transparent, but it's got a little bit of something that Brian Lucy likes. So next up in his chain, he has the, he said this was new, by the way, as of last year, the Overstayer Stereo Field Effect Limiter / Compressor. Similar to an 1176, not exactly the same thing, but yeah, interesting. You can also just disable it if you don't want it or don't need it. So yeah, but here we go. This is what I wanted to talk about. The Model 315 Blue Mark II from Focusrite. Not a lot of information about this, except from Brian Lucy himself, which is pretty cool. I believe it's a mastering version of the Focusrite ISA 215. That's according to the brochure about it that was released quite a bit ago. The sound can be described as having a punchy low end and rich lower mids with a very open mid-range and attacking high end. I should mention that Brian Lucy got his Focusrite equalizer modified because the original one, it wasn't so great. So he got his modified, got a bunch of the, I think the op amps or something removed and then replaced with better ones. I think he said he spent about $1,500 on it, and that was like 10 years ago. So in today's money, what, $2,000 for the upgrade? I don't know. Anyway, the Blue 315. He said it pairs very well with a Fairman TM EQ, which we'll get to that in a few minutes. Clean with a little musical attitude is how he described it, but possibly a digital clean equalizer would be better, is what he admitted to. Works well for steep cuts as well as high passing at 33 Hertz. Plus you can drive it a little bit. It is mid-forward with a plastic sheen. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be negative or positive. Ted Jensen, who is a pretty well-known mastering engineer who works out of Sterling Sound, I believe that's New York, maybe New Jersey. He used to use it or still uses it on every master he does. I mostly use it for cuts, is what somebody else said. So there you go. All right, next up I want to... What was I going to talk about? Let's just see what's next. Okay, the elysia. I was pronouncing this wrong the whole time. I used to call it elysia. It is pronounced elysia. Elysia, like elite, and then elysia. I found out a lot of interesting things about this compressor. First of all, it is way out of my price range. Not to say that this other analog equipment is within my price range, but this one is like something I would probably only buy if one day I won the lottery. Like, I'm just going to be honest. Like, this thing costs $12,000. 12,000 smackaroos for one compressor. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure it sounds great. But man, that's a lot of money. So, what are people talking about? Well, I gotta be honest, it was pretty hard to find reviews on this. Because again, it's $12,000. Not as much as, you know, a Fairchild 670 or something along those lines, but man. Anyway, a lot of people talked about the compressor plugin that was released many, many years ago. And they love it. They absolutely love the plugin. So I'm going to go based off of what they were saying and just say that that this 35-pound beast, yes, this hardware weighs 35 pounds. That is really heavy for a piece of hardware. It can do mid-side and parallel processing. It can do compression, limiting, soft clipping. It has something called auto fast. So yeah, it has smart attack and release settings. It uses like about 100 watts of power maximum, which again is a lot for a compressor. This compressor's claim to fame is that you can make loud masters that also retain dynamic musicality. Not a lot of compressors can lay claim to that. Another cool thing is that you can choose between feed forward or feedback compression. Feed forward is more modern and feedback is a vintage style. And that's about it. I will leave a lot of the sources that I found information from in the pinned comment or the video description. And by the way, if you're wondering why I don't just show you guys the hardware, I don't have that many credits left to use. So, I'm just going to be selfish about that. And, when it's time to renew, I will renew. So this thing, what is this thing? I can tell you that back when it came out in the year 2004, it cost around $9,000. It has 22 tubes of glorious audio. The manufacturer called it the ultimate 6-band stereo all-tube equalizer based upon a tube circuit design from the late 1960s. The full name is Fairman Tube Master Equalizer. Acoustica Audio put a plugin out called Indigo, and EQ1 is sampled off of this unit. And I'll go back to what people have said about this, what we'll call them reviews. It is fantastic for mastering if you like mid-definition. You will love the TM-EQ. It's not too dark, it's not too bright, it's just right. Brian Lucy himself says that it's big, it has a round bottom, and a slight tube distortion to the highs. The shelf boost with bandpass works well on low or high end. Mid-range is wickedly adjustable and sounds good even with high Q boosts. Boost, then cut at high Q is easy to do with trouble spots in low or high mids. And Brian concludes by saying, I haven't heard any equipment that makes me want to redo everything in some time until this. And I think a lot of people out there have had that feeling once they discovered a piece of gear or software that just makes their mixing either easier or a lot better. And look, I'll take his word for it. I haven't tried it out for myself yet, but apparently this is one of the highlights. Besides the Elysia Alpha Compressor, this is probably one of the highlights of this whole unit, besides maybe what's coming up next, and that is this. Apparently this converter, a lot of people still really like it. And that may be a placebo effect, because back in the day, apparently this thing cost like $20,000. And a part of that reason is because it allowed for a mode called HDCD, which I've only seen a few times on CDs that I bought. Apparently it allowed people to encode like 20 bits or 18 bits or something like that of, it was some kind of very nice dithering encoding that allowed 20-bit resolution allegedly, but apparently nowadays, because of different dithering with software, this is pretty much obsolete, but the actual converter quality of this thing is still really, really nice. So I would say that this is probably a highlight of the chain, even though it might be slightly outdated. It doesn't really mean it's bad. This is probably a low light of the package, the Waves L2, which is actually kind of funny to see in this chain because it's a plug-in and you're using a plug-in remotely. That's supposed to be, and the plug-in's called Access Analog. But I don't know if there's a way to take this out of the chain. Like, honestly, like, I just don't want this mucking up my audio. So I'm going to ask Access Analog if there's a way to disengage this. From what I can tell right now, you can't do it. So I'm going to move on to the next piece of hardware, which is really cool. And that is something that I heard about quite some time ago in Bob Katz's his mastering book. He was really liking the Crane Song HEDD 192. And what this is, it's an all digital device. There's no analog stuff in it as far as I know. But what it lets you do is simulate two different tubes. It simulates a tape machine. So tape compression, tape frequency response, distortions. Just try it out and you'll understand why people like it. And actually, because there's so few controls on this thing, I may actually kind of cheat and use the preview and kind of like just boost it. And yeah, you'll hear some audio through this one of these days. And I think that's about it for that. Now let me move on. And if there's something that interests me, oh, here we go. Okay, this is the Dangerous Bax Equalizer, the Bax EQ. Let me make it full screen. So the Bax EQ is actually something that I have a few plugins for. I have the official one, which is made by, I believe, Brainworks / Plugin Alliance. It's a part of that company. And I think at one point it was made for Universal Audio and then it was ported to native with Brainworks had ported it to the native code. And anyway, I need to really try that plugin out. The bottom line is this. It's a simple design. The controls are indeed limited, but judging based off of the user reviews, and I can tell you from my own experience, I used this a lot when I was remastering the Linkin Park tracks. I used a plugin that is an emulation of this. But assuming the plugin isn't as good as the hardware, because I'll be honest with you, the infrasonic mastering chain, it's too rich for my taste. Way too expensive. I don't have enough credits to use it properly, and I'm not going to use it just for this piece of hardware. But I should mention it because this is what some of the user reviews say. The treble frequencies correspond to what you will hear, not the exact shoulder frequency. The low end, however, do match the shoulder frequency. The Bax EQ may sound subtle at first until you hit bypass. It sounds sweet, gentle. It gives stereo depth that will give your mix the final polish it deserves. It lives on my mix bus. By the way, the Baxandal style equalizer is probably the most sold equalizer curves in the entire world on a lot of people's systems in their cars. And if they have a hi-fi system at their house, more than likely it's using Baxandal filters, which a man named Peter Baxandal invented. And apparently he never made a penny off of this design. Or I should say he never made royalties from it. The Bax EQ complements the API 5500 very well. It has an unmistakable radio-ready vibe. You can use it on any master, no matter the genre. It has the smoothness of a Pultec without tube artifacts, and it's akin to API-style equalizers. Even though it's sold as a mix bus equalizer, it works equally well on individual sources. It's a great first insert equalizer when recording. You can quickly cut unwanted low frequencies while enhancing the more musical bass range. Just the same, the high end can be enhanced while cutting the bad sounding upper frequencies. It is the icing on your audio cake. I love it on bass, acoustic guitar, and drum overheads. It's deep, it's punchy, it brought my mixes to life. Silky high end. And now here's a negative review. I've used the Bax EQ for about 2 months now, and I have to say that I'm a little disappointed. After reading all the great reviews on it, I expected it to just blow me away. It did not. If your mix is already properly EQ'd using something else, you can get a little sweetening from this thing, but by no means should you depend on it for your main EQ. It's very subtle, and it's very limited in what it can do. So yeah, I figured I'd throw that one in there to balance things out. And let me take a look at the GUI here. So on the left, we have our low cut filter, which I'm going to tell you I will typically have this starting at either 36 or 30 by default. And then the low shelf, maybe by default, I'd put it around 115. And then to the right of that, we have +5 or -5 decibels of gain. And then next to that is our right control, which you have, again, -5 or +5 decibels of gain. Next to that is our high frequency gain for the left and right channels. And then we can choose what frequency to boost or cut. And then finally, we have our high cut on the output. By default, I'd probably keep it at around 70, maybe 28. And in the middle here, we have the engage button, aka the bypass or engage button. Next up is the Magnum K compressor and equalizer. And I think essentially the person who made this said that the idea behind this channel strip was to do two things primarily. Number one, reduce the harshness of a source. Number two, the airband. Add a nice high-end sheen to whatever you throw at it. So at first when I saw this in the mastering chain, I didn't really understand why you would put another equalizer in here, because you already have two. But I guess that makes sense in that this kind of acts like a de-esser for the whole mix. And yeah, good times. And then let's see, we got the wow, this one, I'll tell you, although I believe that the infrasonic mastering chain is very expensive, there's a reason for it. The gear in it is very nice. This one, this module alone is nice. Now they have it on Access Analog by itself, but chained together with everything else, it just gives that final extra something to a master. And I would say you can use this on any music genre, but particularly more like modern music like pop, hip-hop, R&B, electronic. The Portico 2 master bus processor from R&D, aka Rupert Neve Designs, just sounds phenomenal. Once again, another very expensive piece of hardware, and it just you got to hear it to understand. I will probably talk about it in a dedicated video because it's just that darn good. Treble limiter, I don't know what this is. I think it's some kind of custom hardware. I'm assuming it also does some deharshening if you need any more of it. And then finally we have, what is this one called again? The MBC, which stands for what? I think Master Bus Converter, maybe? I don't know. Or Master Bus Compressor. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But it's another piece of just gear that you might not think you need, but since it's there, you may as well try it. It's got saturation. I think this is like a limiter. You know what I think this is actually, now that I'm thinking about it? I think this is a clipping module. So, you know, a lot of people like to just slam things into a converter because it has like an extra bit of, it makes your masters louder without hurting the transients too much. So I believe that's what the main purpose of the R&D MBC is. And that's about it. I'll just scan through this so you guys can see some other GUIs. But yeah, so it's got the smart, what's this called? The Smart C2, I believe. Yeah. I heard about this one in one of the books that I read a long time ago. and never got a chance to try it. Maybe I will one day. To me, it looks like it's a competitor to the SSL bus compressor. I don't know if it's a clone or just a different design. And here we have, now they have this on Mix Analog. It is the Giraffe G24, which is, I believe, it's 2 compressors in one. The way it was described to me is, if your mix already sounds great and you just want it to be louder and transparent, use this. And I'll be honest with you, because I'm not really that familiar with what it does and how it works, I've never really tried it. So maybe I'll try it one day. I don't know. I kind of like what I already, know and use, but, here's another one. The Tube Vitalizer from SPL. I guess it's like an exciter and, overall mix bus enhancer. Make your tracks sound better. Oh, this is a new one. I didn't talk about this yet. So the Dolby system, or I should just say Dolby A-361. Now, what does this do? Well, it does something that it really wasn't intended to do, and that is add some extra high-endness to a vocal. So it's it's like a vocal, not a vocal, but a high-end exciter, and it really wasn't intended to be used this way. And I was told that back in the day, these things were very expensive. I think they were released in like the 1970s, originally for movie theaters, actually. And the idea was that tape was very noisy. Back then it was. And in order to make tape less noisy, you did Dolby encoding, and then you also needed the decoding on the other end. Well, guess what? This only makes use of the Dolby encoding, because what it does is it has a multi-band enhancer, essentially. So it does very interesting things to a signal without messing it up. And I'm going to try it on a vocal that I just recorded and see what it does. Maybe I'll try it on this voiceover right here. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. How is the Dolby Type A 361? All right, I am like really tired right now, so I'm going to go to bed and wrap this video up right now. I'm going to just see if there's anything left that I missed. Oh, here we go. So they also added another Manley variable mu to the lineup here, and we're going to see what the difference is between version 4, which is the original one that they had up on the server, I think. And then compare that to this. I'm not sure if this was the original one that they had up or not, but obviously the version 4 is older. So I'll flip back and forth between these two, so you can see the differences between the controls. And yeah, I'll put it on screen very large. Once again, version 9. I love it. I love that they have 2 of these. Essentially, it is a modern day Fairchild 670, from what I understand. The trick is to just use a tiny, tiny bit of gain reduction. Like, honestly, no more than 2 at the most. 2 decibels of gain reduction. And this thing just sounds like butter. Now, that's for the mix bus. Now, if you send something else for this, like a vocal or a bass guitar or something along those lines, which, by the way, I've never personally tried, but apparently you can use this on tracks and it sounds pretty darn good. Yeah, try it out, see if you like it. If not, then try something else. Distressor sounds good on pretty much everything. That's my go-to. I'll probably be buying a distressor in, I'm going to say, the near future, just because I want something on the way in that is clean and works good. And yes, Access Analog has 2 distressors for you to use on your mixes and masters. Anyway, again, I'm really tired. Thank you all for watching this, everybody. Hope you learned something. Hope you try Access Analog. and mix analog on your next music projects.